Hello Linux fans. Today we're going to talk about the commands needed to administer users and groups within the Linux operating system. So let's go to the computer and see how this is done. The first command we're going to talk about is the useradd command. And the syntax for that is the word useradd and the username. What this command does is it adds a new user to the user account to the system. The UID shell, home directory, and the etc. are taken from two files that contain user creation default value. If we don't add some options, it's simply going to create a line to the passwd file. The options will help take information from the etc. login.defs file and the etc default useradd option. So these are the two subdirectories that are involved in basically adding new users to our Linux system. These are some of the options that we could add. You see the C option is a description. It adds a description to the field in the passwd file. The -D signifies the home directory that we're going to be adding, which is the path name to the user's home directory. -E is the expiration date. -F is the number of days the account can exist with an expired password is disabled. G is the group. You remember, for every user we create, there is a unique group created. Capital G can specify other group memberships for the user account. M specifies the home directory that should be created for the user account. /K is the directory, the skeleton directory used when copying the files to the new home directory. S is for the login shell, the shell used for that user account, and -U specifies the particular UID that's going to be used for that user account. Now let's go and take a look at what this means when we're actually using a terminal. So if we type in useradd, and you notice we're typing in user Bob, it says useradd cannot lock. Okay, that just basically means we don't have permission. So what we need to do, go back, use the sudo command, which will give us root access. We enter our password, and if we now type in you see it did it. No error messages. It probably worked. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use the less to visualize our file, and we're going to type in the etc, and we're going to type in the passwd file, and you could see on the bottom of the file we scroll down, and that last line right there is Bob. And you see the password isn't there, it's in the shadow file. His UID is 1003, group 1003, home Bob, and he's using the sh shell as his default shell. Note he doesn't have to use bash shell. You could specify different defaults of shell. And in this case, Linux Mint is actually defaulting to the old style bourne shell instead of the bourne again shell, which would be bash. The old bourne shell is sh. So let's go now and type in a command to see if we can get a tty. We'll open up a tty. Notice we're no longer in a terminal. We are in a true tty. And you notice that we can't log in. Okay, no matter what we do or no matter what we say, we can't log in. That's because the useradd command by default does not allow us to assign a password. That would be an option we would have to add later. We'll get into a way around that a little later in the video. And that's a way Linux Mint sort of guarantees security. It won't let you log in with a null password. Like Windows, this is one of the differences between Windows and Linux. Windows, if you go into the password file and you delete the hash of the password, you're basically assigning it a blank password, and that will let you log in to Windows without any password at all. With Linux, if you delete the hash for the password, it basically gives you a null password, and with Linux will not allow you to log in. At least Linux Mint will not let you log in with a null password. So that is an extra security feature, and that's how a lot of security people maintain security on their big systems. When they disable an account, what they do is they go in, they delete the password, no one can log in. Later they go back in, they reinstate a new password, and that way users can log in again. So that's an important concept to know. The passwd command, the password, okay, username, that starts the dialog for assigning or changing passwords. All users must have a password before they log in. The root user can reset the password on any user account or the super user. Regular users can change their own password using this command, but not anybody else's. And Linux does not allow blank passwords. So a blank password, like I mentioned, will pretty much act to lock the account. So those are important things to know when you're actually administering a Linux system. So let's go back to our terminal, and we're going to type in the passwd, and we're going to use the user Bob. Notice again it's saying you may not view or modify password information for Bob. Again, we need super user privileges. We type in sudo, we enter our password. Notice it's asking for a Unix password. Well, Unix was the forerunner of what we call Linux today, and some of those old things still hold true. It wants us to confirm what the new Unix password is, and then we get the message that the password is updated successfully. Now we can go into our TTY. We could log in as Bob. We type in our password, and notice it's not moving, it's not giving dots or anything. Again, security measures. And you notice now we have a prompt. This prompt is a little different. You'll notice it's not the bash prompt you're used to seeing. What this prompt is it's the Bourne shell prompt, or the sh shell prompt, because that's what the default was for Bob. So you see the $sign, that basically means we're an ordinary user. We're logging in with our home directory, which in this case you kind of see as root. If we do an ls to see what's in our home directory, you see all the files there are pretty much root files. So that's a little bit intriguing about creating a user in this manner, in that their home directory is basically the root directory. That's why we need the pwd command, print working directory. And we type that in, and we see that it is indeed root, as indicated by the slash in our terminal, actually our TTY, which is a true terminal, not an emulated terminal like you get in the GUI. If you go to cd home/Bob, you notice it doesn't exist because we didn't use an option to create a home directory. If we go to cd home and then ls, you see that there's tech user1. There's no Bob, because when we created Bob using the useradd command, it did not specify, and we did not use the option to create a home directory. Those are those options you need to use on the diagram that was in the second slide that we talked about. You could either use that option, or there is another command that we can use, which we will discuss in a little bit. So let's continue with our discussion. The usernod command, that's used to modify user account information after the creation. And if you use the usernod-l, new name, old name syntax, what that will do is it will change the login name from Bob G to Barb G. You could use that basically to change the login name. You cannot change the password expire info that's in the shadow file, because that is a completely different file stored elsewhere on the computer. The user mod options we see in this slide here. There's a -C for description, etc. When you're modifying user accounts, you want to make sure that you modify the password expire information. Okay, you could use the change, okay, the CHANGE. Okay, if you use the options, the -M, you're resetting minutes to 2 days. You're setting the max to 50 days. You're warning to 7 for the account listed. To use usermod to lock an account, you can make the account temporarily unusable by altering the password information. In other words, usermod -L, the username, will lock the account that you named. To change the shell. Another way to lock an account is to change the shell from bin bash to an invalid shell. So you use the /s option, and you could change it to bin/false for that username. Changes in the shell info stored, okay, which will be in the Etsy password to a non-existent shell, will cause the login to abort. You cannot log in to a false shell. If you just use the /sh command, it'll change a valid shell to an invalid shell. That's another way to keep a user from logging in. And if you notice a lot of passwd files, whenever you see bin/false, that is a shell that you do not want to run if it's a daemon process, or a user that you do not want to be able to log in if it is a user process. There's 3 simple ways to lock an account. You can use the user mod with the -L in the account name. That will lock the account, Bob G in this case. To unlock it, you'd use the user mod with the U. Okay, you could use the /sh with the S, changing the shell to false for that username, which basically changes everything over to a non-existent shell. Or, as we mentioned, you could erase the password. Deleting the user account basically gets rid of the user account and all associated information. For that, you use the userdel command. Userdel in the username will remove the user account. When the account is deleted, any files that were previously owned by that user become owned by the number that represents the UID of the deleted user. Remember, all users have a UID. Any future user assigned to that UID becomes the owner of those files. And if you use the -R option, you erase the home directory. So -R erases the home directory. If you do not use the -R, the home directory stays. And if you hire a replacement person for that user, the replacement person, if you make sure to assign them the same UID as the account person you deleted, the new person will now have ownership of all of the old person's files. If, let's say, they're hired in a capacity to do the same job, they will now have ownership of all of their predecessors' work. And that's a good way of passing files down from one user doing a job to the next user. If you want to replace a user with a new hire, which is a little bit of what we were talking about, you could delete the user Bob G. It'll delete the user account from Bob G and delete the line in the password and in the shadow file. The home directory files owned by Bob G are still owned by his UID. Let's just use 502 as an example. If you hire a new employee named Sue B and she's hired to replace Bob G, then you would add, using the useradd command, you would use the -U, and you would specify 502 because you want to make sure that her UID is 502, so she will now own all of Bob G's files. This will create a new user account, Sue B, with Bob G's UID 502. Therefore, his home directory, she will take ownership of all of his files and presumably be able to manage his work. Managing groups. You have group adds a group. Group mod modifies the name of a group, GID. Group del will delete an entire group. Groups prints a list of the groups the user is a member of. And just FYI, the -etc/group stores the group membership. So if you look into that file that's stored in etc group, you'll see the storage of all the group memberships for all the groups. Let's take a look at how some of those work. So we'll type in groups, tech, cd-rom, sudo, dip. Okay, those are all the groups, all the different groups on this particular VM right now. So we see which groups are in place. Samba share has to do with networking, sudo is the sudoers group, etc. So let's go into the etc subdirectory right here, and we'll go into the groups file. Okay, so we'll go into the etc, and we'll cat to print out some of what we're talking about. We'll cat out the groups. Okay, and we could see using this is the content of the actual groups file within the etc subdirectory. Some of them are daemons, as you can kind of tell, but tech, user1, user2, and Bob are the 3 users that we're using. You notice again with Mint, the user ID start at 1000. The daemon processes are usually below 1000. In this case, our highest one is 118. So we kind of see, what's going on here as far as, now we could see here that tech is also a member of the admin group, because if we go over and highlight that, we could see it. Add user is a better way to do it than the user add, because you don't have to specify options. Using all of these commands to create and administer user accounts is tiresome. So most administrators in Linux, they write a script to simplify the task. Ubuntu and derived distros, which includes Mint of course, have a built-in script called adduser to simplify creating new users, written opposite of standard user add command. And we'll see how that works in a minute, because you run that command and it asks you everything, and you go in and you enter boom, 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 and everything is done for you. You don't have to worry about options or assigning things after the user is created. Everything is assigned to the user at the time of creation. And again, this is done with the script. The true power of Linux is the ability to write scripts to automate this stuff. Automation is wonderful when you could write a script to do it all, and then you don't have to do it by hand all the time. So let's take a look at the adduser command and how we use that in the real world. We go back to our VM. We type in the word sudo, because again we want root privileges, and we type in adduser this time, and we're going to type in a username. Let's say Bill. Okay, sudo wants a password, so we give it a password, and it says adding user Bill, the new group for Bill. It'll add the group. It'll create the home directory, which is home Bill. That's written in the script. Now it copies the common files that go into all the accounts from the skell file, short for skeleton, which is like a templated blank. It'll ask for the password, okay, because the password we want to be unique. It'll ask to retype the password for security reasons. Okay, here's where we get to do all our comments after it creates the password. We get to enter their full name, their room number, all this other fun stuff. This is all optional. You could put it, you don't have to put it. It's for your information. It'll ask if it's correct. You say yes, boom, the user is added. Everything is there, one command, one pass-through. Now if we go into our true TTY, again you notice we're not in a terminal under the GUI, we are in a TTY, and you try logging in as Bill, and there you go. And you have your prompt for Bill, okay? So you could type in pwd, and you see that our home directory is now home/Bill. It's not root like it was when we used adduser. It's home Bill. If we do an ls on our home directory and we specify all, you see you have all of the common files that every user is created with, the files and the directories, and the permissions are all the default permissions. That's because they're copied out of that skeleton file that the script that we ran took it from. So those are the Linux user administration commands that we use most often when administering a real live Linux operating system, Linux server out in big industry, where you have a Linux system administrator administering a system with multiple users on it. I hope you learned a lot from watching this video. Have a good day.